Welcome back. For much of today, if you've been with Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405, you'll have seen we've been looking at various political parties from the ANC, the DA, as well as the EFF, looking at where they are post the local government elections at the end of last year and in preparation, of course, of the national elections in 2024. We've heard Julius Malema, leader of the EFF, speaking about how that party would perhaps work with the ANC come 2024 if someone like Paul Mashatile is in fact elected to lead. There are various other issues around the DA, for example, and who it's willing to back come 2024. It says it's willing to lead a coalition government, the first at national level, if things go that way. In the last few hours, in fact, we've also learned of the suspension of Cope President Mosiua Lekota. Let's take all of that up then with elections analyst Wayne Sussman, who's joining us from Johannesburg, I believe. Wayne, good to have you on. So, Mosiua Lekota, President of the Congress of the People, suspended today. He started out as one of two faces of the organization. Then he was left. What does his suspension mean for Cope, which has been doing rather badly at the ballot?
Thank you very much. It's great to be on your show. Let's take a step back. Mosiua Lekota has played has had an outsized impact on ridding South Africa of apartheid and playing a key role both in the ANC and in the formation of Cope. However, since the 2014 elections, Cope's fortunes have plummeted and gone south. And one would have thought that Mosiua Lekota, who, as I said, is a veteran of South African politics, would have made the decision after his party's poor showing either in the 2019 national and provincial elections or in the 2021 local government elections that he had taken the party where he could. Yet we find ourselves here today on this Monday in late August that he's been suspended for allegedly causing derision and division within the party structures. Now, there's not much party structures left, and I think we've got to reach a stage in South African politics where political leaders are accountable for their performances at the polls. And a party like Cope, their fortunes have been deteriorating. I think he should have gone on his own accord last year or in 2019 and not waited for the party to boot him out.
Why is it that breakaways of the ANC, with the exception, of course, of the EFF, some would argue, fail to sustain gains post their first or second election?
I'm glad you mentioned the EFF there. I think credit needs to be given to the EFF because they are a two-election breakaway success story. We know that they did well in the 2014 elections and sustained themselves and actually almost doubled their percentages in the 2019 elections. So the EFF is the exception to the norm. I think parties like Cope, and as you said at the start, it was formed by two prominent people, Mbazima Shiloh being the other one. And then if one takes the UDM into account, these become organizations framed around one individual. And you don't see much contestation, you don't see much elections for party leadership. And ultimately, the organizations are linked to that one particular personality. General Holomisa is another person who played a very key role in South African politics, but he's been at the ship for a very long time, and his party's fortunes have also been deteriorating. So I think what we need to see more of in South African politics is elections, is to see democratic contestation, healthy democratic contestation within parties, and for people who are talented and see a future for the country and for themselves in politics to say, I'm going to choose party Y because that party has potential, but that I can also make my impact and maybe, if I prove myself, one day lead that party. And I think those doors are closed in many opposition parties because they're built around one particular personality. Opposition
parties this time round are pinning their hopes on the predicted or the prospect, shall we say, of a possible government of not national unity, but a coalition at national government level come 2024. What are your thoughts on how much of a reality that is and the idea that the ANC could, for the very first time, dip below 51 or 50%?
There's a long way to go. I mean, 2024 is not so far away, but a lot can happen within 2 years. But I would say, as of late August today, there are 3 possible scenarios. I agree that there is a realistic chance that the ANC, even though its majority will be reduced, and I believe in 2024 it will have its worst electoral results in the national elections, that they might just sneak over the lines. The second scenario is similar to what we've seen in eThekwini in Durban, where you see the ANC fall below the 50% mark, but finding favor with smaller parties. Now, what does this mean in our parliament? These might be parties led with 1 or 2 MPs, not more than that, and they're able to cobble a coalition and get over the line. The third scenario is a coalition of uncommon objectives, which would include the official opposition and their bitter enemies, the EFF, parties like Action SA, which are definitely going to make an impact in the 2024 elections, other parties who I've spoken about, parties like the IFP, parties like the Freedom Front. And I know that parties like the DA are rooting that out right now, but I fail to see a scenario where the opposition parties can get above 50% without either working with the ANC or the EFF. And I would also say at this stage, even though the EFF have been suggesting otherwise recently, I would find it difficult to see the EFF wanting to work with the ANC, because the EFF, they're very smart operators. It's an impressive political party. As I said, they're a 2-election breakaway success story from the ANC. Mm-hmm. They realize that their path to growth is through a weakened ANC, a beleaguered ANC, and they wouldn't want to prop up the ANC and give it another chance of ruling. So I'd say the 3 most likely scenarios are a narrow ANC victory, an ANC finding favor with smaller parties, or a coalition of uncommon objectives between a range of opposition parties.
But then, if not decided on ideology and policy, what would determine who sides with whom?
It's going to be very messy. We've got international examples of this where it hasn't worked well, where parties come together for one particular mission, and that is to remove a personality or a party which has ruled for a very, very long time. I think that would be the core objective. That's the easy part, to remove that party if they get below 50%.
But how stable, Wayne, pardon me, I'm so sorry, but just on what you were saying, how solid a government can you build on the ideology of my enemy, or the enemy of my enemy is my friend, so to speak?
I agree. I do not think it will be stable. I think there'll be a lot of headaches. We're seeing already headaches on local government level. Let's look at Tshwane, where you have a coalition of common objectives. I would say that the DA, Action SA, the Freedom Front, and the ACDP have much in common. They have massive challenges there. That's not even us taking into consideration Johannesburg or Ekurhuleni or metro like Nelson Mandela Bay. So it's going to be very difficult, and the stakes are much higher on a national level. So I think that South African voters, if they feel that the best course of action is to remove the ANC, might find themselves on this day in late August 2022 caught between the devil and the deep blue sea.
There was a complexity that you wanted to go into in your previous response, where you talk about how setting up a coalition is the easy part.
Correct. So I believe in a coalition, just like any partnership. You have to give the different the different coalition partners victories, small victories. So one, you need a common platform. The common platform would be that it would be the best for the country for the ANC to be removed from power. But tangibly, on policy, we know that the EFF and the DA are very far apart. We know that the Freedom Front is even further apart from the EFF when it comes to policy. So what portfolios can you give to the EFF or to the DA, knowing that their supporters would be happy with that, but your own supporters will not feel betrayed? That's going to be very, very difficult. We've seen many examples around the world. The most a good example is the United Kingdom, where the Liberal Democrats were forced to help the Conservative Party form a coalition to remove the Labour Party. And that was disastrous for Liberal Democrats. So particularly smaller coalition partners that have much to lose, and parties are going to have to think very carefully. On the one hand, yes, it's easy if you get that party below 50% to kick them out of power, but to govern effectively for all South Africans, to show benefits to the supporters who waited hours in the polls to vote for you, for them to see benefit in the coalition government, that's going to be much harder.
2024 will also be very historic for us because it will be 30 years of democracy in South Africa. And I want to take that then and pin to it a question of how flexible the South African voter has become since 1994.
Well, we saw it in the 2021 local government elections that this was the ANC's worst performance ever. And when one considers the high point of the ANC, where they have gotten over 60% of the vote in numerous local government elections, that is a devastating setback for them. That means that either their voters feel that they are less compelled to show up and vote, or that they can lend their votes to other parties. Now, I want to say something of why I think today it would be foolish to say that the ANC are guaranteed of falling below 50%. We saw a big factor in our local government elections in 2021 was the phenomenon of local parties who ran on local issues. Many of those parties were born out of ANC activists in the area or civil society champions in those areas. Those parties are probably not likely to run in the 2024 elections, and therefore you could argue that those voters will either stay away or maybe lend their vote for the ANC in one more time. So we are seeing political fluctuations. We saw a party like Action SA make an inroads into Soweto. We saw many South Africans vote for local parties. We saw the ANC removed from power in all of the Gauteng metros. We saw the ANC come close to losing eThekwini. We also saw the DA lose a municipality which had governed previously the Western Cape. So we do see political fluctuations, and I think the younger the voter gets, the more first-time voters we have, the more likely we are to see that voters will shift their votes and are less likely to vote for the party, whether it's the ANC or the DA in its previous incarnations, or the IFP, and vote for other parties.
Wayne Sussman, always good to have your time. Thank you.